Hey everyone, have you ever had that person in your life who was like a piece of yourself? Like, it wasn't just friendship, it was something way deeper, almost spiritual? Well, this is the story of a 22-year-old girl who lost exactly that in the worst possible way. And when I say worst way, I'm talking about a ghosting so brutal, so devastating, that it literally changed who she was as a person. Let me give you context because this is intense as hell. This girl had a best friend named Jess, and they were inseparable since they were 7 years old, man. 15 years of friendship built on blood, literally. When they were 10, they did that dumb ritual of cutting their fingers and mixing blood to become real sisters. They were so close that both their parents joked they must have switched the babies at the hospital because they looked more like each other than their own families. Everyone at school thought they were kind of obsessed with each other, and maybe they were. Like those friendships that are almost toxic from how intense they are, you know? They had each other's passwords for everything: social media, email, Netflix, bank accounts. They knew details nobody else knew, secrets they'd take to the grave. When the girl's younger brother died in a car accident, she didn't tell anyone he was drunk driving, only Jess. When Jess was assaulted at a party at 16, she only told this girl. Not her parents, not the police, nobody. They carried each other's traumas as if they were their own. They had matching tattoos, but not those corny infinity ones, no. It was the date they met, carved on their wrists, like a permanent scar. And then something bizarre happened. 3 weeks before Jess completely disappeared, she did something strange. She sent a message at 2 in the morning, just saying, "Forgive me for everything." And when the girl asked what was going on, she said nothing, just "love you." The next day, she acted like nothing had happened. But wait, because it gets way worse and more bizarre than it seems. Because when Jess finally vanished, it wasn't just a regular ghosting. It was planned, meticulous, almost surgical. The girl woke up on a normal Tuesday and realized Jess had blocked her on absolutely everything at once: Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, even Venmo, where they split bills. All the photos Jess had of them together archived or deleted. Years of memories simply erased as if they never existed. And there's more. Jess changed her phone number without warning. Like, who does that? But the most disturbing part? She kept following the girl's mom on social media. She kept liking her family's photos, commenting little hearts, sending birthday messages to her mom, as if the girl specifically had been cut out, but the family was still welcome. Her mom got so confused, she actually asked Jess what had happened, and Jess responded with something vague, like, "Sometimes people grow up and go different paths." Different paths? After 15 years? After being literally the most important person in each other's lives? The girl started investigating like an obsessed detective. She created fake Instagram accounts just to be able to see what Jess was posting. And what she saw destroyed her inside. Jess had replaced her. She had a new best friend, a girl named Madison she met in college. And it wasn't just a casual friend, it was like an upgraded version of her. They posted photos with captions that used to be inside jokes between her and Jess. They used the same filters, went to the same places. It was like Jess had simply traded her in for a newer model. But there's a sinister detail in all this. Madison was absurdly similar to her physically. Same height, same hair type, same clothing style. It was way too disturbing. And look, this girl's head started spiraling in ways that bordered on insanity. She wasn't just sad, she was obsessed. She started stalking Jess in increasingly extreme and concerning ways. She'd drive to her house at 3 in the morning just to see if the lights were on. She'd follow her from a distance when she saw her car around town. She created 15 different fake accounts on all social media platforms. She even managed to hack Jess's Instagram using the old password she still remembered, and she'd read her DMs with other people, searching for any mention of her name, any clue about what went wrong. And you know what she discovered that completely destroyed her? Jess was talking about her to other people, but she wasn't talking badly, which would have been easier to process. She simply pretended the girl never existed. When someone asked about her old best friend, Jess would say she distanced herself from toxic friendships from high school, but never cited names, never gave details. Like 15 years could be summed up as toxic friendships. She went into such a deep hole of self-destruction that she started harming herself, not to end things, but just to feel something other than that constant emotional pain. She was admitted twice to treatment centers for severe mental health crises. Her parents were desperate, not understanding what had happened to their daughter, who had always been so stable, so happy. But she couldn't explain. How do you explain to someone that the person you loved more than any boyfriend, more than family, simply decided you didn't even deserve an explanation? The therapist suggested that maybe she had developed an unhealthy emotional dependency, that their friendship had always been codependent and toxic, but she didn't want to hear that. She wanted Jess back. She wanted to understand. She wanted closure. But closure never came, just the infinite emptiness of not knowing. But then, 5 complete years later, when she had finally managed to rebuild some fragile version of inner peace, the bomb explodes. Jess sends a message. And it's not just any message, it's a 3-page emotional testament saying her dad died of cancer and she needed to talk, that she couldn't live anymore with the weight of what she'd done. The girl's first reaction was almost throwing up from anxiety. 5 years of silence, and now this? She showed her boyfriend, who immediately said to block and move on. She showed her therapist, who was more cautious but clearly worried about a relapse. But she couldn't. She had to know. She responded after 3 days of agony, and Jess immediately called. 15 minutes on the phone where Jess cried uncontrollably, talking about her dad, about regrets, about how she'd been a coward. And then she dropped the bomb that nobody, absolutely nobody, was expecting. Jess was in love with her. Like romantically in love, since they were 14. And when she realized these feelings would never be reciprocated, that the girl was completely straight and would never look at her that way, she collapsed. She couldn't keep pretending it was just friendship, when inside she was dying every time she saw her kissing guys at parties, dating, talking about crushes. So she did the only thing she thought would save her. She cut contact brutally to try to kill the feelings. And it worked for a while. She really managed to move on, dated other people, made new friends, but she never completely got over it. And now with her dad dying, she realized she'd wasted years of the most important friendship of her life because of unrequited love that she never should have let destroy everything. And man, this revelation blew the girl's mind in ways she wasn't even remotely prepared to process. Because suddenly, 15 years of memories became something completely different. All those nights sleeping cuddled together, all those I love yous she thought were platonic, all those times Jess got weird when she talked about boyfriends. Everything made sense now, in a disturbing and confusing way. She didn't know if she was angry, if she felt guilty, if she felt sorry, if she was flattered. It was a toxic mixture of all these emotions at once. And Jess didn't stop there. She kept pouring out truths like it was a final confession before dying. She said Madison, her replacement, was just a desperate attempt to replicate what they had, but in a safer, more controlled way. That she purposefully chose someone physically similar because she wanted to feel like she still had her in her life, but without the pain of unrequited love. That she spent years in therapy trying to process this. That she knew she'd been selfish and cruel, but was too paralyzed by shame and fear of rejection to go back. And then came the request that made everything even more complicated. Jess begged her to come to her dad's funeral, said she needed her there, that her dad always asked about her before dying, that he always loved her like a second daughter. And look, the girl was completely torn. Part of her, that part that never really got over the loss, wanted to go. She wanted to be there for Jess in the hardest moment of her life. She wanted to honor the memory of Jess's dad, who really was always incredible to her. But the other part, the part that had been forged through 5 years of intensive therapy and painful reconstruction, knew it was a terrible idea. That she didn't owe this to Jess, that going would be opening a door that took years to close. She spent the whole night awake, turning over every memory, every moment, trying to decide what to do. And that's when she made the hardest decision of her life. She was going to the funeral, but not for the reasons Jess expected. She was going to give the closure she never had. She was going to say everything that needed to be said, and she was leaving forever. She arrived at the funeral dressed in black, hands shaking, heart racing. Jess saw her and broke down, ran to hug her, as if the 5 years hadn't existed. And there, in the middle of the wake, with Jess's dad's casket a few feet away, she did something nobody expected. She pulled Jess to a private corner and let everything out. She said she understood now, that she didn't blame her for falling in love, that sexual orientation isn't a choice, but that the way she handled it was cruel, selfish, and traumatic in ways Jess would never fully understand. That she'd spent years blaming herself, destroying herself, wondering what was so wrong with her that made the most important person in her life simply evaporate. That she had scars on her wrists that would always remind her of the darkest places this ghosting took her. And then she said the final, devastating truth. That she forgave Jess, genuinely forgave her, but they would never get back what they had. That people don't come back from traumas like this intact. That she had built a new life, with healthy boundaries, with people who communicate even when it's hard, and she wasn't willing to risk all that in an attempt to resurrect something that died 5 years ago. Jess begged, cried, said it could be different now, that she was in therapy, that she'd matured. But she stood firm. She said she wished happiness for Jess, that she hoped she'd find peace and true love, but that love would never be with her. Not as a friend, not as anything. And then she did something symbolic and final. She pulled up her sleeve and showed the tattoo of the date they met, the one they got together at 18. And right there, in front of Jess, she scheduled on her phone a laser removal session for the following week. She said she was going to erase that mark the same way Jess had erased her from her life, but that unlike Jess, she was doing it with honesty, looking in her eyes, giving the closure they both deserved. She left the funeral without looking back, cried the whole way home, but for the first time in 5 years, she felt she had truly closed that chapter. And folks, sometimes the happy ending isn't reconciliation, it's having the courage to let go.